Join me, Lou Diamond, on a new podcast show called Why They Listen, where I sit down with incredible leaders and communicators from different industries, unique platforms, and special programming from across the globe, and take a deeper dive into not only how they communicate, but how they connect and engage audiences, and why those audiences listen. You can find a new episode of Why They Listen wherever you listen to your podcasts, or at Aimcast, AIMECAST.com.
You know what always cheers me up? Rolled up aces over kings. Check raising stupid tourists and taking huge pots off of them. Playing all-night high-limit hold'em at the Taj. Stacks and towers of checks I can't even see over. And Thrive Loud with Lou Diamond.
I don't need to teach you to be more like me. I need to teach you to be more like you.
Longtime listener and a huge fan.
Lou, I am tremendous.
And the more I unplug from technology and people, the more I can serve people with technology.
What you're standing for with connection, I think it's the key to everything.
You're just an amazing breath of fresh air for sure.
Lou, you're a diamond in the rough, my man.
Because for me, if I'm not living high energy, I'm surviving and I want to be thriving.
Get ready to thrive loud with Lou Diamond.
I love it.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Thrive Loud with Lou Diamond, connecting you to the most inspiring and amazing people that are thriving each and every day. I'm your host, Lou Diamond. Today on Thrive Loud, we have a recovering addict, acclaimed speaker, Inc. 500 entrepreneur, award-winning 3-time CEO, a leadership coach, and author of Great Leaders Live Like Drug Addicts, How to Lead Like Your Life Depends on It. I don't need to do more for this bio with a start like that. Let's jump right into it. Thrive Loud listeners, Michael Brody-Waite. Michael, how are you today?
I'm good, man. How are you, dude?
Michael, we'll give the shout out right at the top of the show here to Kimberly Seltzer. Kimmy is a spectacular individual. I know you had a chance to connect with her.
Yeah.
And she connected us, which she's got the best smile ever, right?
I mean, I'm not even sure she does. You know, it's a really nice smile. But
even by your podcast artwork, you'd be able to look at it. So, Michael, this story is pretty unbelievable. Maybe you could share your journey a little here for the listeners so they can be brought up to speed. And then I want to dive into this topic because I guess you've taken a life experience, which is one tough one, but has translated it to how great leaders can lead. So I'm going to pass the baton to you.
Yeah. You know, if you're listening, you probably have a drug addict in your life. So I'll do a high level on where I was. But, you know, at the age of 23, I'd been kicked out of school. I'd been kicked out of my job, kicked out of my house. My car had been repossessed. My money was literally whatever I could steal from you. And my doctor said that my liver enzymes were higher than I was. And all I did all day was just use drugs and drink. And I figured I'd be dead. And what I've learned by being a drug addict is that I think that leaders should learn how to lead from drug addicts. I know that sounds really weird, but I got clean September 1st, 2002. I woke up at Betty Ford Center, Rancho Mirage, California. A very surreal experience. I've been clean ever since. Active in my program, my recovery, and I've got, you know, some experience leading, as you just said. And the big thing that I did was taking all of my experiences in my recovery, and you know, we all know somebody that's been a recovering addict or was an addict, and someone who's been a great leader. But my thing is taking the process that millions of addicts have been using for 80 years to recover, and turning that into a leadership framework that allowed the people that I led to truly become great leaders in a very novel way. And that's kind of my focus.
Michael, let's dig a little deeper into that. I want to double click on that. And that is, okay, so talk to me and our listeners a little more about what are some of maybe the core components that where the similarities are in the way drug addicts live and how you should lead.
Yeah. And I also love it when people say double click. So like huge points for that. I say that to some people, they're like, what? I'm like, come on, man, you're around a computer too.
I'm guessing at some point or another, like, you know, that's going to be outdated. Someone will listen to this episode 20 years from now, like double click. What do you mean? Because now you'll be able to like, you know, just, you know, snap your fingers and drill down at the level you want.
Right. You just say Alexa.
Exactly. Right.
Or Hey Siri.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna be a little bit of a geek here, and from a leadership perspective. So there are 3 things that leaders do, and then I'll talk about how it relates to recovery. But they say yes to things that they could say no to. They hide their weaknesses, and they avoid difficult conversations.
Wow.
And the reason I focus on these 3 things in particular is both my leadership experience, my addiction experience. But see, this is what drug addicts do. So say yes when you could say no. I was saying yes to drugs all day, every day, when what I needed to do was I needed to say no. The reason that I continued to be in the hell of addiction was because I was hiding the weakness of addiction, not asking for help. And any conversation that was going to lead to an intervention or anyone talking about my problem or that was going to be uncomfortable, I avoided at all costs. And so my addiction meant that I was addicted to these 3 behaviors, but this is actually, these 3 behaviors are the things that's holding back all the leaders that I've ever come across in my entire career. Like I've worked with companies like Google and Dell and nonprofits and startups and my company. And it turns out that all leaders are addicted to those 3 behaviors. The difference is they don't have recovery. And so I'll double click further. I'm going to do it for you, Lou.
Please. Thanks.
So saying yes when you could say no. So on average, employees spend 31 hours a month in unnecessary meetings.
Yeah.
Hiding a weakness. I once spent 22 hours trying to figure out how to do a Microsoft Excel pivot table because I didn't want to do 10 minutes of telling someone I didn't know how to do it. And then avoiding difficult conversations. 70% of employees at companies right now are avoiding difficult conversation with their boss, coworker, or someone they manage. And that's before you talk about external people like customers or whatever. And I'll tell you what, you want to talk about the place where this shows up the most is performance improvement plans. And I have a crazy story one time where I had to put my mom on a performance improvement plan. I told her she didn't shape up, I'd have to kick her out of the company. And a lot of people just, we know that we're supposed to do these things, but here's the definition of addiction. When you do the same thing over and over again, despite a negative consequence. And right now, what we have is an epidemic that is greater than alcohol or drugs. We have companies and leadership teams full of people that are saying yes when they could say no, hiding a weakness, avoiding difficult conversations, just like I did with the drugs when I was in active addiction.
These difficult conversations, I don't want to press against it and say that everybody's in this direction, but I do believe there's a movement to try to address it more. There's more active coaching going on. There's more openness in conversations. How can we help get business leaders into business rehab, for lack of a better analogy, so that they can start to understand the consequences of their actions a little bit more in front? Because call it what it is, Michael, your life literally depended on it by the fact that you were addicted to the drugs and alcohol that you were. But a lot of business people don't see that, or do they? That's where I want to dive into here. How can we help them go through this rehab?
Yeah. So, and it's crazy to me because anyone that has an addict in their life, they're going to know that what I'm about to say is true. You can tell an addict to stop using until you are blue in the face, but they won't stop. Okay. It's not like I didn't know that I needed to stop using drugs. Like the DARE campaign, that was not successful. Telling people to stop something is not helpful. And yet what we have is podcasts, online courses, and books and inspirational messages that say, stop saying yes. Just be yourself. Just lean into the difficult conversation. And yet, even though we have a movement, just like we had a movement to stop, drug addiction in the 70s, we still have the problem because addicts don't get clean when you tell them to stop. They only get clean when you tell them what to start instead. And what I believe is the way that I tried to get clean initially was I was one of the first subscribers to Netflix. I figured, you know what? Instead of getting high and drunk, I'm going to watch a movie. The problem is by the 3rd night, I thought, you know what? While I'm watching that movie, I'm like, I'd like to get drunk while I'm watching this movie. And it did not work for me. And then I thought, you know what? I'm just going to get into a health kick. I was living in California, like I'd kookaroo like 7 days in a row, and I was pretty proud of myself. Then on the 8th day, I thought, what would go great with some chicken is a case of beer and an eighth of weed. Like that sounds like that's just a perfect compliment. And so the problem is that I think that we've misdiagnosed leaders. I think that the problem is we're talking about symptoms. We're not talking about the problem. They're addicted to these behaviors because they keep doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. So when I woke up at rehab, they didn't say, stop doing this. They showed me a 12-step program that, first of all, helped me understand that I had a problem called addiction. That's really what the first 3 steps are. Had me do an inventory so I could understand how much it had cost me, and then gave me an ongoing process that allowed me to stay clean. And so like an example is for 18 years, so for like 6,500 days plus, I haven't used alcohol or drugs. But I don't know one executive that can tell me they've gone 6,500 days without saying yes, hiding a weakness, or avoiding a difficult conversation. So the real question is, if I could drop alcohol and drugs and cigarettes and all this kind of stuff, why aren't leaders more clearly and simply and easily doing these things? It's because they're addicted to these behaviors, and we've never really diagnosed it. And that's why they need to go to leader rehab, which I don't know if you did that intentionally, but that's something that I actually provide as a service.
I double clicked onto your website.
Okay,
a little bit more. Come on, Michael.
All right. Well, literally my products as like a speaker and coach are the intervention, which is a speaking engagement, the rehab, which is a workshop, and then the sponsorship, which is the coaching program.
Yeah, that's great.
Because I truly believe people are addicted to these behaviors. And like you said, what made me different as I grew my career at a Fortune 50 company and founding my company and running a nonprofit and all this kind of stuff, what really helped me was I had a loaded gun pointed to my head. I couldn't do these things because they were against what I was being taught to do. I was being taught to say no on a regular basis. I was being taught to aggressively share my weaknesses and to lean into all the difficult conversations, because if I don't, there's a chance, and I know this sounds crazy, it could lead me to using. Right. So I have an incentive that most people don't.
So interesting, Michael. I've noted in my conversations with many leaders, and very successful ones, that there's this extreme personality syndrome with some of the most successful people I've ever come across in my life. They will swing from these very highs in either direction. The direction you had started, and obviously on a path towards a destruction, and then almost towards a complete opposite direction to the other direction. Some people have taken it into religion or beliefs, or even health kicks or extremes in that sense. And not only for their personal behavior, but I've seen this carry over into the workplace. Do you think there is something to be said about the inner makeup of great leaders like yourself in having the perspective that has almost like this big swinging arc to be able to have that wider range, which can go to extremes, versus maybe where the majority of the people are in the middle between the 20 and 80%, if you would, on the bell curve of life, of where people can go with. One, do you agree with this? And two, do you think there's something to that?
Man, I think that's a really interesting question. And I don't know that I believe I have the smartest answer.
Okay.
But when you were saying that, here's what I thought of is, as an entrepreneur, I know a lot of entrepreneurs, and they all look like addicts to me, dude. Like they all look like addicts. They may not be addicted to alcohol or drugs, but a lot of them are. But they all look like addicts to me. They act like addicts. They smell like addicts. They have that extreme personality. And I think that there's something to what you're saying where you see this disproportionate level of that extreme personality show itself, in my experience, both in entrepreneurs and addicts. But I think that what that extreme personality enables people to do is to do this thing that we teach and that I call, and I'm not like completely novel in this, but uncomfortable work.
Yeah.
That extreme personality makes us push past the physical discomfort. People can be good at smart work and hard work, and that's physical and intellectual, But a lot of us avoid uncomfortable work. Like that's the person that's doing 8 hours of hard or smart work instead of the 10 minutes of uncomfortable work, just like the pivot table example that I gave you.
Just for the record, I too, when the first time I had to do a pivot table, knew exactly what you were talking about. That's why I laughed so much, because everyone that had to encounter that the first time was like, what the heck is this thing?
Man, I know they've made it better, but I still don't know how to do it. I don't know how I got through my experience at Dell. Like I simulated pivot tables.
Understood.
Just so it's
Sorry
so
for
inefficient. No. I'm glad I'm not alone.
Yep.
But so I think that we're willing to push through and do uncomfortable work. And so what I'm really fascinated by is how can you take these principles that addicts use to recover and activate the potential inside of everybody that doesn't necessarily have that egoic self-will that's willing to push through all that discomfort to get something that they want. How can you actually help anyone do uncomfortable work? And in my experience, like that has to do with teaching people. So like the three things that we teach is how to practice rigorous authenticity, how to surrender the outcome, and how to do uncomfortable work. And when you put those three things together, when you're really open about what your limitations are, and what your vulnerabilities are, and when you surrender like what everybody thinks about that, and you learn how to do that, like muscle memory, like it's a master skill, you do a disproportionate amount of uncomfortable work. But what a lot of people do is they just hide their true self. They say, you know what, I'm going to say yes to everything because I'm scared to say no, or I'm not going to let anybody know about my weaknesses because I could get found out, or I could get fired, or I'm not going to have those difficult conversations because I'm worried I'm going to upset that person. And so what you get is a lot of people that don't have the extreme personalities and don't have a system like this or a framework like this, and they aren't realizing their potential, not because they're not capable of it, but because they don't have that thing that's making them drive through and do that uncomfortable work anyway.
No. Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think the one last question I wanted to do before I pull back the curtain and talk more about you is in having the uncomfortable conversation, there is that aspect of a fine line between encouraging employees or teammates or whatnot. Having the conversation with salespeople, if they're not performing and making their numbers, the more you delay that, the worse it is for the company. It falls right in line with what you're saying. There could be other aspects, though, from a interpersonal social aspect that can be challenging. And a lot of people like to interject that. I guess in living like a drug addict and doing the things that we need to, should we be less concerned about maybe that decorum and the way that we communicate with our peers on that level? You hear where I'm going with on this. Yes.
Yeah. And I think that, in our current world, where everything's snack size, I think people take really extreme concepts and they try to apply them to everything and say that they fit everything. Like, oh, just be authentic and just, don't care what people think. And so then I'll go do a speaking engagement for a corporation and be like, but what if my employee's an asshole?
Right.
Like, do I really want them to be authentic? And so the way I illustrate this is I think it's just, when you are willing to not hide your true self, the world gives you a feedback loop for what's appropriate for your position in the world and for whatever your station is, whatever your job is. And so the example I always like to use is after I did my TED talk, great leaders do what drug addicts do, practice rigorous authenticity. For 3 months, I thought I was Tony Robbins. I started doing interventions on anybody that was in my sphere. I was like, I'm just going to tell them what I think. And so my 3 best friends in recovery during the course of that 3-month period all had a talk with me where they said, something's changed and you become more arrogant and you seem to think that you know how to live my life better than I do. And the thing is that I still believe that the observations that were unsolicited that I was making on them were correct. But the process that I was going through was incredibly arrogant and was violating a value that I had that was even greater, which is in recovery. For those of us who are in recovery, we only share experience. We don't give advice.
Yeah.
And so as they all gave me that feedback, I had a choice to make. And the choice was the same one I had when someone said, you shouldn't wear flip-flops when you do your TED Talk. And I was like, well, I'm going to be true to myself and wear my freaking flip-flops. And that's the number one comment on the TED Talk feed. Is the freaking flip-flops, by the way. And I have jacked up feet, dude. They are ugly. So it was not an easy thing to do. But so, I was willing to be myself there. And even though people said I shouldn't, but when my friend said, you're getting arrogant, you're telling us what to do, I was like, you know what? That's not who I want to be. I want to be a recovering addict that shares his experience. I want to respect my friend's process. And I want to recognize that I'm not God and I don't actually know what's best for them. So why don't I just back off? And I got an opportunity to grow. But if I had hid behind the mask of like, oh, you're wrong, you don't get me, or you just don't want to face the truth, then I wouldn't have gotten that feedback loop. It wouldn't have changed my behavior. And so I think for all of us, the world, I mean, if you just go walk in the middle of the street naked, the world's going to give you a correction, whether you like it or not.
Yep.
So I think as long as we're willing to be open, like addicts talk a lot about owning our side of the street. And I think as long as I look at my side of the street, every time I experience something that doesn't go my way in the world, and I'm willing to own what I need to do to learn and grow, I think that feedback loop gives me right size for what my station in life is. And I don't, everybody's got a different role to play, and it's not as simple as just be yourself no matter what.
Michael, I'm interested to hear where this question goes. I love asking guests on this program. We have great days where our businesses are kicking on all cylinders, and no one knows this better than you. We do have days when we're not quite thriving, and we'll have off days. On those days today, not 19 years ago, but on those days today, when you have trouble thriving, what practice do you seek or individual do you seek out to get yourself back on the thriving track?
Great question. And every time I talk to a recovering addict that has relapsed, I know the 5 things that they need to do, not all days, but they need to do some of the things, some of the days. And I know the 5 things they need to have done in order to stay clean. And I know that they didn't do one of them. And so without going into like necessarily like all the recovery stuff, there are some just core things I think to maintaining my spiritual condition that I can always fall back on. And so, because usually if I'm having a bad day with my business, very rarely am I actually having a bad day with my business. It's that my brain is like in fear, or I'm perception or future tripping or whatever. Like very rarely is it actually a bad day. It's all this like made up crap in my head. So what I do is I first go back to, am I maintaining my spiritual condition? So what does that look like? That means, am I praying and meditating in the morning? Am I reaching out to an addict in need? Am I attending meetings? Am I working steps? Like I start to go back to, for me, my recovery, and say, am I actually taking these actions? Because what I learned a long time ago in doing this thing called a daily inventory was there's a very strong correlation, not between what was actually happening with my business, but what was happening in my mind and my fear about my business. Huge correlation between when I break from that spiritual practice of getting spiritually centered with God, getting spiritually centered within, and then reaching out to people so I get outside of myself, and then doing the basics of my recovery. When I wasn't doing those things, that's when this, like an email that doesn't mean anything could become, we're screwed, the company's done. And then at the same time, when I'm doing those things, I could have a customer that's 70% of our revenue say they're looking at a competitor and be able to surrender it and let go. Yeah. Most of it's about my internal experience. It's not about what's going on around me. So I just go back to that checkbox for myself internally.
Yeah, it's kind of like the therapy has become the addiction in a weird way, and making sure that you need that ritual to keep yourself.
Oh yeah, people are like, you're just addicted to recovery now. I'm like, yep, works out a lot better that way.
Totally.
I haven't robbed you yet, so I don't think that's a problem.
No, it's totally great. I love it. Let's do this. Let's do the admin part of the show here, Michael. Share with the listeners all the places people can find you: websites, URLs, social sites, whatever you got, things going on, where we can get the book. We will put all the links in the show notes, but it always gets more engagement when they hear it directly from you.
Yeah, dude. So the first 25 years of my life, I got my ass kicked because I have a hyphenated last name, Brody-Waite. But it serves me well because in the last 15 years, if you Google Michael Brody-Waite, I own SEO for that jacked up last name. I'm the only one. So you can find me that way. I'm on all the socials, although I'm not actively posting content because I made the unique decision to not do that for a while. But if you go to michaelbrodywaite.com, you can learn more about me. And if you go to greatleaderbook.com, you can look and learn more about my book and see if you want to use the principles that addicts use to recover for yourself.
Totally get that, by the way, because there are days that I need to detox from the social aspect of what I do each day. And for the record, with a name like Michael Brody-Waite, don't be complaining when you have a name like Lou Diamond and you got to deal with a former B actor all the time when you're trying to deal with search engines. Anyway.
Dude, no, you got me beat on that, dude.
Michael, permission to go down Fun Street with you here at the end of Thrive Loud.
Has anyone ever said no?
No, one time I got somebody who was very hesitant. They were like, I don't know. I'm like, come on,
oh my God. Through it. I know. Come on, dude. You can do this. Yes.
I think they were acting. Okay. So let's start off. Can you share with the listeners an all-time favorite movie?
For me, Inception. I'm all about how perception affects our experience on this earth, and that one effed my perception 10 times over. I still don't know if what the spinning top really means at the end.
Well, it's great. And the way they end that movie is just an editing genius. You have no idea if it stops or not.
Yep.
Okay. This part is the speed round of Fun Street, pretty much, where I'm going to ask you a question. I want you to say things, the first thing that comes to the mind that lifts you up, makes you feel good, and makes you thrive. Okay. Cool. Ready? A song that you love to hear or that pumps you up.
I Want to Rock by Twisted Sister.
Favorite food that's not a dessert.
Cheeseburger.
Favorite dessert.
Can I say cheeseburger again?
You're the first.
Brownie with ice cream.
An activity you wish you did more of.
Basketball.
An activity you wish you did less of.
Working out.
Michael, if you can go anywhere in the world after snapping your fingers, where are you?
Home.
Michael Brody-Waite, truly a pleasure to have you here on Thrive Loud. Inspiring stuff that you've done in your life. Continue to be on the thriving track, which you seem to be. And a great message. Great leaders live like drug addicts. And I think you've spoken it well. And I'm loving the whole intervention therapy and sponsorship. What a great way to theme and carry everything through your life. So continued success.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
You got it. And to all our listeners out there, thank you for joining us. And until next time, keep thriving onward and upward. And remember, be brief, be bright, be gone.
You've been listening to Thrive Loud with your host, Lou Diamond. Check us out on the web at thriveloud.com and follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook at Thrive Loud. And check us out on the Good Pods app at Thrive Loud, where you can follow, listen, and connect directly to Lou and all of the Thrive Loud episodes. Thanks for listening.